Some stories begin with a miracle. Others begin with a prayer. But this one begins with a boy who looked at the glowing screen of a computer and saw not distraction, but divinity. He would one day be called the Cyber Apostle, the first millennial to be beatified by the Catholic Church. But before all the titles, before the sanctuaries, before the world came to know his name, he was just a quiet Italian teenager named Carlo Acutis. He was born on May 3, 1991, in London, but he grew up in Milan, Italy. His parents were not especially religious. They attended church only on rare occasions, like so many families swept into the rhythm of modern life. But Carlo was different. From the age of 7, he was drawn, pulled, toward something no one else around him could quite explain. He would pass by a church, and stop. He would look at the tabernacle, and whisper softly, "I want to see Jesus." He wasn't curious in the ordinary sense. He was hungry. Hungry for the sacred, hungry for truth. When he received his first Holy Communion, his mother expected him to be restless, like most children. But instead, he sat perfectly still, eyes closed, whispering prayers that sounded far too deep for a child his age. From that day on, he promised he would never miss daily Mass. "The Eucharist," he said later, "is my highway to heaven." Carlo loved computers. Not just playing with them, he understood them, as though the language of code was another way of reading creation. At 12, he began designing websites. At 13, he was teaching himself programming, video editing, and graphic design. And by 14, he was building something extraordinary, a digital exhibition cataloging every Eucharistic miracle ever recorded across the world. When others used the internet for entertainment, Carlo used it for evangelization. He once said, "The internet is a gift from God, but we must use it for good, not waste time on things that lead us away from Him." His friends thought he was just another tech genius. But in truth, he was something rarer, a mystic in modern clothes. He stayed up late building his website, not for profit, not for praise. He wanted to show the world that God is real, that He still works miracles every day, especially through the Eucharist. He once told his classmates, "If people understood the value of the Eucharist, churches would be full." He believed that Jesus was truly present, body, blood, soul, and divinity, in the Blessed Sacrament. And that the internet, this new global network of minds, could become a bridge to that mystery. A web of grace. He wasn't just holy in theory. He lived holiness in action. Every morning, he went to Mass. Every evening, he spent time before the Blessed Sacrament. He prayed the Rosary daily. He read Scripture. He volunteered at soup kitchens and gave his allowance to the poor. But what stood out most was his joy. He smiled easily, joked kindly, forgave quickly. Even when mocked for being too religious, he never retaliated, only smiled, saying, "They'll understand one day." And maybe he knew something they didn't. He once defended a boy who was being bullied. When asked why, he said simply, "Everyone is born with a soul. That's worth defending." To Carlo, holiness wasn't about perfection, it was about attention. Attention to love, to kindness, to presence. Sadness, he wrote once, is looking at yourself. Happiness is looking toward God. That was his secret. He never looked inward in despair, he looked upward, and forward, in hope. When his Eucharistic Miracles exhibition went online, people began to notice. Parishes wrote to him from around the world. Soon, the exhibit was translated into multiple languages and physically displayed across continents. It traveled to churches, schools, even cathedrals. A 14-year-old boy had created something that would evangelize millions. But Carlo didn't take pride in it. He said, "The more we receive the Eucharist, the more we become like Jesus, so that on this earth we can shine his light." He didn't see himself as a genius or a saint. He saw himself as a mirror, reflecting God's light into a world shadowed by distraction. As Carlo grew older, he began to speak about death, not with fear, but with a strange peace. He once told his mother, Antonia, "I will die young, but I'll give my life for the Pope and for the Church." She dismissed it as youthful idealism. But deep inside, she felt a quiet unease. Because Carlo spoke those words with certainty, not as hope, but as destiny. In October 2006, he suddenly fell ill. At first, they thought it was the flu. But soon, his condition worsened, rapidly, devastatingly. Doctors diagnosed him with acute promyelocytic leukemia, one of the most aggressive forms of cancer. His body began to fail. But his soul did not. Carlo was hospitalized in Monza. The nurses said he never complained. Not once. He offered his pain for the Church, for the Pope, for souls in need. He said, "I offer all the suffering I will have to suffer for the Lord, for the Pope, and for the Church." Even as his body grew weaker, his peace grew stronger. His mother recalls entering his room one night, tears in her eyes. Carlo looked up, smiled, and whispered, "Don't be sad. I am going to heaven." He was 15. On October 12, 2006, Carlo Acutis received the Holy Eucharist for the last time. He closed his eyes, whispered a prayer, and surrendered his soul to God. He died peacefully. But that moment, that quiet, holy moment, was not an end. It was the beginning of a light that would never go out. Years later, when Carlo's tomb was opened, something astonishing was discovered. His body was found incorrupt, preserved, serene, untouched by decay. He looked as though he were only asleep, still dressed in his jeans, his Nike sneakers, and his smile. They moved his body to Assisi, the land of St. Francis, another youth who had changed the world through simplicity and love. Thousands began to visit his resting place. And in that chapel, countless hearts were rekindled. He once said, "Our aim has to be infinite, not the finite. The infinite is our homeland. Heaven has been waiting for us forever." Maybe that's why his story continues to move so many, because in a world obsessed with noise, Carlo teaches us how to be still. In a generation addicted to distraction, he shows us what it means to focus on what truly matters. He found God not in silence alone, but in the rhythm of the digital age. And perhaps, that's the miracle. Not just that he lived with faith, but that he proved holiness is still possible, even online. If you believe light can pass through wires. If you believe God still works in pixels, in stories, in the souls who share them, then write in the comments, "Illuminate my soul, Carlo." Because faith, like light, travels fastest when shared. He was just 15 years old. But through him, heaven touched the modern world. And maybe, if we listen closely, we'll still hear his quiet prayer echoing through the circuits and screens of our time. To be always united with Jesus, this is my life's plan. When Carlo Acutis died, his family thought the world would soon forget him. After all, he was only 15, one more soul gone too soon. But heaven had other plans. In the quiet streets of Assisi, a whisper began to spread. A whisper that turned into a story, and then into a movement. People who had never met Carlo spoke of him as if they had. His face appeared on prayer cards, his words shared online, his story retold across languages. The digital boy who loved God had become a light that refused to fade. His mother, Antonia, had once been far from faith. But through Carlo, her heart was reborn. In the days after his death, she said she felt her son's presence, not in visions, but in the quiet strength that filled her heart. Carlo led me back to God, she would later say. Through my son, I found eternity. She began to receive letters, from priests, students, parents, all telling the same thing. That Carlo's story had rekindled their love for the Eucharist. A spark had been lit. And soon, that spark would ignite into something far greater. In 2007, just 1 year after his death, his Eucharistic Miracles exhibition began to travel. It appeared in parishes, cathedrals, and universities. Soon, it crossed oceans, displayed in the United States, the Philippines, South America, and Africa. Tens of thousands walked through those exhibitions, seeing images of bread turned to flesh, wine turned to blood, signs of God's real presence through centuries. At the entrance of each exhibition was Carlo's photograph. A smiling boy in a red shirt, looking not at the camera, but through it, as though already seeing heaven. Something about him felt timeless, the way saints often do. And as his story spread, young people, who had long felt distant from the church, began to listen. Here was someone like them. A gamer. A coder. A son of the digital age. And yet, he had used all that to point upward, toward a light that never dims. In him, they saw what holiness could look like in their world, not ancient robes, not stained glass, but jeans, sneakers, and a laptop. If you've ever wondered whether God can use your talents, your art, your skills, your screen, to bring light to others, then Carlo's story is your answer. Write in the comments, use me, Lord, like Carlo. Because sometimes, a single yes, a single click of obedience, can echo across eternity. Years later, in Brazil, a small child named Mateus lay dying. His mother held his hand, watching as her little boy slipped away. He had a rare condition, his pancreas and small intestine were nearly destroyed. Doctors could do nothing more. In her desperation, she turned to prayer. A local priest told her about a young boy from Italy, Carlo Acutis, whose life had touched millions. He suggested she pray for Carlo's intercession. And so, one night, she knelt by her son's bedside, tears streaming down her face, and whispered, "Carlo, if you are in heaven, please ask Jesus to heal my child." She placed a small photo of him under her pillow. The next morning, the child woke up, smiling, laughing, asking for food. His mother called the doctors. They ran tests, again and again. But the disease was gone. No explanation. No trace. Just life, restored. Word spread quickly. The local diocese began investigating. Soon, the Vatican joined, sending physicians, theologians, and investigators to examine every detail. They interviewed doctors, analyzed reports, tested medical data. Every explanation collapsed under the weight of the impossible. In 2020, the Church declared it a miracle. The healing that would lead to Carlo Acutis being declared blessed. On October 10, 2020, the Church gathered in Assisi. Pilgrims from around the world filled the square, many young, many holding phones, live streaming, crying, praying. For the first time in history, the Church was beatifying a millennial. A teenager who used the internet as a road to heaven. Inside the basilica, Carlo's mother stood quietly in the front pew, her hands clasped. When the bishop read his name, Blessed Carlo Acutis, she wept, not with pride, but with peace. The digital boy from Milan had been raised to the altars. Not for perfection, but for love. His incorrupt body, resting in Assisi, was placed under an altar of glass, his sneakers still on his feet. Thousands filed past him that day, whispering prayers, snapping photos, crossing themselves with tears. They didn't just see a saint. They saw proof that holiness is still possible in our time. Blessed Carlo's story swept across continents, inspiring films, books, songs, and documentaries. Youth groups named after him sprang up in schools. He became known as the patron of the internet, the cyber apostle, the influencer of heaven. And though his body lies in Assisi, his voice echoes through every screen that carries his story. He once said, "The Eucharist is my highway to heaven." Now millions travel that same road, led by his example. Carlo's life was short, 15 years. But in those years, he showed what eternity looks like when lived well. He taught 3 things. First, love the Eucharist, because in that small piece of bread, heaven hides itself. Second, use your gifts for good, because holiness is not withdrawal, it's creation. Third, aim for the infinite, because everything else fades. He used to say, "All people are born originals, but many die as photocopies." Don't be a copy. Be the soul God created you to be. If you feel those words stirring in your heart, write in the comments, "Make me original, Lord." Because grace begins where imitation ends. Today, young Catholics around the world see Carlo as one of their own. Proof that sainthood isn't a relic of the past. He showed that holiness isn't about being strange. It's about being whole. That joy can live in a screen-lit world. That prayer can rise between emails and algorithms. That the sacred can still speak in pixels. He used his laptop as his mission field. And now, his words light up millions of screens. To be always close to Jesus, that's my life's plan. It's strange, isn't it? The same internet that can spread darkness can also carry a spark of heaven. Carlo showed us that the web doesn't have to entangle. It can connect, uplift, illuminate. He turned technology into theology, screens into sanctuaries. And that's why his story matters now more than ever. Pope Francis spoke of him with affection, calling him a model of holiness for the digital generation. He said, "Carlo did not rest in comfort. He recognized the needs of others and knew that true happiness comes from God." And perhaps, that's the question Carlo leaves for all of us today. In a world of endless scrolling, can we still stop long enough to adore? In a time of digital noise, can we still hear the still, small voice of love? Maybe Carlo's story isn't just about miracles. Maybe it's about what happens when one heart, however young, says yes. Because in his yes, a whole generation found its direction again. And in his death, faith was reborn for millions. If you've ever felt lost, forgotten, or unseen, remember Carlo's words. God has written for each of us a unique story, don't erase it. Let those words sink deep. And if you believe your story still has purpose, write in the comments, "Let my story shine, Carlo." Because sometimes your light begins when you share someone else's. The boy from Milan is gone from this world. But his legacy, his joy, his love, his digital faith, remains alive. He is proof that heaven doesn't need to wait. It can begin now. In the way we love. In the way we click. In the way we shine. Blessed Carlo Acutis, pray for us. They called him the influencer of God. A saint in sneakers. A teenager who uploaded heaven to the world. But beyond the headlines, beyond the miracles, and beyond the glass coffin in Assisi, lies the real story. The story of what happens when faith touches technology. And a boy's heartbeat becomes a digital hymn that never stops echoing. After Carlo's beatification in 2020, Assisi became more than a pilgrimage site. It became a classroom of light. Every day, hundreds arrived from Italy, Poland, Brazil, Nigeria, the Philippines. Many were young, faces glowing from phone screens as they filmed the shrine, whispering prayers under their breath. Some came out of curiosity. Others came out of pain. But most came searching for what Carlo had found, a love that does not end. He rests there now. Not as a relic of the past, but as a mirror for our time. His face still carries that same gentle smile. The one that says, yes, you too can be holy. In silence, pilgrims kneel. Some weep. Some lift their phones, recording the moment. A strange mingling of devotion and technology that Carlo himself would have loved. If you've ever felt God calling you to something deeper, write in the comments, lead me higher, Carlo. Because faith begins in a whisper. And one whisper can awaken the world. In 2022, another story emerged. One that would soon become the second miracle attributed to Carlo's intercession. A young woman, struck by severe head trauma after an accident, lay unconscious, her brain swelling beyond hope. Her family prayed, doctors despaired. And once again, somewhere in that dark hospital corridor, someone whispered a name, Carlo Acutis. They placed a small relic beside her pillow, a fragment of his clothing. Days passed. Then one morning, she opened her eyes. No pain. No memory loss. Only gratitude. The Vatican's medical team examined everything. Records, scans, surgeon testimonies. Science could not explain it. In that silence of unknowing, the Church heard heaven's voice once more. And in 2025, as the world watched, the Church announced what millions had long believed. Blessed Carlo Acutis would soon become St. Carlo. Rome had not seen such a gathering in years. On that morning, the square overflowed. Pilgrims holding rosaries, teens wearing Carlo's face on t-shirts. Priests holding up Eucharistic images in the sun. And when the Holy Father's voice broke the air, declaring Carlo Acutis a saint of the Universal Church, the crowd erupted into tears and applause. Bells rang across Italy. In Assisi, children danced. And across the internet, millions watched live. For the first time in history, the canonization of a saint was witnessed by the digital world. A stream of grace through screens, cables, and satellites. Heaven had gone viral. Carlo's story is not just about miracles. It's about meaning. And about what faith looks like in the world we live in now. He taught us that holiness isn't an escape from modern life. It's the sanctification of it. Your keyboard can become an altar. Your feed can become a mission field. Your screen, a window to grace. The internet, Carlo once said, can be used to spread evil or to spread good. It depends on us. Those words feel prophetic now. Spoken by a boy who saw farther than most adults ever could. He dreamed of a generation that would not just scroll, but serve. Not just follow, but worship. Not just connect, but convert hearts. Maybe that's what heaven's algorithm looks like. Not lines of code, but acts of love. Each one connecting souls to God. Each click carrying light through darkness. If you want to be part of that divine network, write in the comments, add me, Lord. Because the greatest connection you'll ever make is the one that links you back to heaven. All around the world, stories began to surface. Stories of quiet conversions, unexpected healings, and inner awakenings. A teenager in Abuja, who once mocked prayer, now kneels before the Eucharist every Sunday, because he saw Carlo's face and heard his laughter online. A mother in Argentina returned to confession after 20 years, because her daughter told her about a boy who loved Jesus more than games. A web designer in Manila began using his skills to build church websites, saying, "If Carlo could, why can't I?" These are not statistics. They are souls. Lives transformed by a single witness. And that is the true miracle. Not one healing, but millions of awakenings. Because one life lived for God is never lived in vain. Sometimes, we forget how young he really was. 15. Still in high school. Still learning, laughing, playing soccer, coding websites. But even then, he lived with a clarity most adults spend decades searching for. He used to say, "We are all destined for infinite joy." That was not a slogan. It was a prophecy. For Carlo, holiness was not a burden. It was a form of happiness. The kind that never fades when the battery dies. He once said that visiting Jesus in the Eucharist was like recharging your soul. Perhaps that's why he glowed, why people still feel peace when they see his face. He had learned the secret of joy. Stay plugged into the source. And that's what he asks of us, even now. So, if you're watching this, wherever you are, close your eyes for a moment. Breathe. And whisper with faith, "Jesus, be my source." Because holiness, in the end, is not about doing more. It's about staying connected. In a way, Carlo's dream has come true. He once wanted to make the Eucharist known to as many people as possible. Now, his story is known on every continent, shared in every language. But maybe he's not done yet. Maybe, even now, he's still programming something. A new code written in grace. A divine upload. A network of souls united in light. Every prayer you whisper? Every act of kindness? Every time you choose truth over comfort? You add another node to that network. That's heaven's algorithm, where every yes to God becomes another signal of love, echoing forever. When Carlo died, I thought my life had ended. But then I realized it had just begun again. Because my son didn't die. He simply went ahead of me, into the light. And with tears, she smiles. Because the boy who once built a website for Eucharistic miracles has now become one himself. The story of St. Carlo Acutis isn't just meant to inspire. It's meant to invite. Invite you to believe that holiness is possible. Invite you to live with purpose. Invite you to make your own corner of the internet shine. You don't have to wear a halo. You just have to live with love. So right now, yes, you, watching this, say quietly, "Carlo, pray for me." And if your heart feels it, type it in the comments, "Make me a saint in my generation." Because grace travels faster than Wi-Fi. And heaven is always online. 15 years. One boy. One heartbeat that outlasted death. He gave his life to God. And God gave him to the world. The miracle of Carlo Acutis isn't just in the healing of a child. It's in the healing of an age. An age that had forgotten how to believe. Through him, heaven whispered to earth once again, "You are still loved." St. Carlo Acutis, pray for us. Be always united with Jesus. That is my life plan. St. Carlo Acutis.